Tyler Perry wasn't supposed to be the one to set the internet on fire that night. Everyone tuned into the 25th BET Awards expecting glitz, glamour, and a few viral moments. But what nobody expected was for Perry, Hollywood's soft-spoken, mogul and longtime supporter of Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, to grab the mic and drop what felt like a live exposé. His words weren't sharp in delivery, but the meaning behind them sliced through Meghan's carefully polished image like a hot knife through butter. Let's rewind a bit. Back in 2020, when Harry and Meghan left the royal family behind, Perry was the guy who stepped in when nobody else would. He gave them the keys to his $18 million Beverly Hills mansion, covered their security, paid their bills, and essentially ensured they had a soft landing in America. At the time, it looked like a generous move from a friend who understood the pressure of fame and public scrutiny. But what we didn't see behind the scenes was how that friendship slowly turned into a one-sided transaction that Perry says left him emotionally and financially drained. And that's what made his speech at the BET Awards so shocking. Perry didn't name Meghan directly, but he didn't need to. He told the story of offering someone his home, his help, and his heart, only to be ghosted once they got what they needed. Some folks borrow blessings like they're owed but never return the favor, he said. The camera didn't pan to anyone, but if you knew the history, you knew exactly who he meant. Behind closed doors, Perry had reportedly been biting his tongue for years, but this time, something snapped. Sources say it started when Meghan requested access to his private jet, a simple favor, she called it, without any discussion of logistics or cost. When Perry declined, not because he couldn't afford it, but because he felt used, Meghan allegedly lashed out. That moment, he later told insiders, was the turning point. What started as a favor between friends had turned into a pattern of entitlement, and Perry wasn't the only one feeling that way. According to multiple sources close to him, staffers, colleagues, and even producers began warning him behind the scenes. Meghan doesn't repay favors. She accumulates them like social currency, and then cuts people off when they stop serving her narrative. At first, Perry ignored the whispers. He genuinely believed he was helping two people in need. But as time passed, as the Netflix and Spotify deals rolled in, as the millions stacked up, and as the gratitude stayed silent, it became clear there was no plan to give back. The moment Perry took the stage that night, he wasn't just telling a story. He was making a statement. Even the most generous people have a breaking point, and when they reach it, they're done being quiet. Meghan had built her brand on the image of a misunderstood woman silenced by the crown. But Perry wasn't the crown. He wasn't the tabloids. He was the guy who opened his doors, no strings attached, and now he was publicly calling her out. Just like that, the audience, both in the building and online, saw a different side of the fairy tale, where the savior turns into the whistleblower, where Hollywood's nicest guy finally says, enough is enough. What made it hit even harder was the timing. Meghan and Harry had just started pitching a new documentary about power and freedom, but after Perry's speech, investors began backing out. The trust was gone. The illusion cracked, and Meghan's last true ally walked away. The fallout was instant. Hollywood, a place built on unspoken rules and mutual back-scratching, doesn't usually take sides in public drama. But Tyler Perry wasn't just anyone. He's a studio-owning powerhouse, respected not just for his creative empire, but for the way he moves quietly with class. So when someone like that throws shade, especially at someone he once protected, the ripple effect is massive. Phone calls started happening the next morning. A producer attached to Meghan and Harry's latest Netflix pitch reportedly withdrew their support just hours after the BET Awards aired. Another investor, who had already sat through 2 planning meetings for the project, said bluntly, "I don't want to be involved in something that feels this toxic." That wasn't about the content. It was about the people behind it. Meghan's name, once seen as a draw for platforms trying to look progressive and inclusive, was suddenly looking like a red flag. Back at Archewell, Meghan's PR team scrambled. They reached out to major media outlets, trying to reframe the narrative. The goal? Paint Perry as bitter and out of touch, someone who misunderstood Meghan's intentions. They offered exclusive interviews, access to behind-the-scenes footage, even floated a podcast rebuttal. But none of it stuck. Journalists didn't bite. If anything, the effort made things worse. It reeked of desperation. The harder they pushed, the more people started wondering, what exactly were they trying to cover up? Behind the scenes, things got even messier. Friends close to Perry began sharing that he hadn't wanted to go public, but felt cornered after years of being emotionally manipulated. He'd spent months debating whether to say anything at all. But the final straw wasn't the private jet incident or the business proposal with no plan. It was the realization that Meghan wasn't just ungrateful, she was actively weaponizing their friendship to win influence. One person familiar with Perry's team said Meghan tried to leverage his name to gain access to a funding circle in early 2024. She mentioned his support in a pitch meeting without his permission, suggesting he was a silent backer of her new media venture. When word got back to Perry, he was livid. That's when he decided to go public, not to gossip, but to protect his reputation from being co-opted. And that's when others started speaking out too. A former assistant from Meghan's team described the work environment as emotionally exhausting. They claimed Meghan controlled every narrative, demanded loyalty, and punished anyone who questioned her decisions. A producer who had worked with the couple on their now-defunct Spotify deals said Meghan's obsession with perfection killed every good idea. She didn't want partners, they said. She wanted yes men. Even Oprah's circle, once considered tight with Meghan, began to quietly distance themselves. Sources say there haven't been any friendly calls between the two camps for months. And when Perry's speech blew up, there was radio silence from Oprah's team. No defense, no solidarity, just space. The dominoes were falling. Meghan had positioned herself as a symbol of female empowerment and independence. But now, that image was being ripped apart by the very people who once supported her journey. To many, it felt like a mask had been lifted. The stories weren't coming from tabloids this time. They were coming from people who had actually worked with her, helped her, and, in Perry's case, literally housed her. As the days passed, what began as one man's bold words turned into a cultural shift. Meghan Markle was no longer untouchable. The backlash didn't just affect Meghan's reputation. It started hitting her bank accounts. With Netflix reportedly re-evaluating its long-term commitment and other potential investors pulling out, Archewell's financial future looked shaky. Sources close to the foundation revealed that several internal projects had already been paused. Scheduled hires were frozen. Budget reviews were happening weekly. What was once a booming brand, backed by celebrity buzz and major platforms, was now surrounded by hesitation and damage control. Public trust was unraveling too. Meghan had long cultivated the image of a misunderstood woman navigating royal oppression. She was the voice of empowerment, the underdog who took on the monarchy. But now, with insiders sharing stories of emotional manipulation, excessive demands, and selective loyalty, people started questioning how much of that story was ever true. Social media sentiment, once split, began leaning heavily toward skepticism. Hashtags that once supported her were now flooded with criticism, memes, and side-by-side comparisons, painting her as entitled and disingenuous. For Meghan, who had meticulously curated every aspect of her public image, this wasn't just a PR hit. It was an identity crisis. The narrative she leaned on, feminist icon, victim of royal cruelty, self-made media mogul, were all being dissected and doubted in real time. Even longtime fans found themselves silent. Media outlets that used to jump at the chance to publish glowing features were holding back. Nobody wanted to risk aligning with a brand in freefall. Behind closed doors, Insiders say Meghan was in panic mode. She fired off furious texts to Perry following the BET speech, accusing him of betrayal, humiliation, and damaging her family's legacy. But Perry didn't reply. Not then, not later. He was done, and that silence spoke volumes. Friends of the Hollywood mogul began confirming that he had been emotionally cornered for years, pressured to give more, say less, and constantly stay loyal to a person who saw loyalty as currency. Other voices followed. A respected publicist said Meghan's team had attempted to blacklist journalists for asking unscripted questions. A former Archewell consultant revealed that Meghan often ignored strategic advice if it didn't reinforce her personal narrative. One former staffer described the workplace as a place where gratitude went to die. The stories were damning, not because they were dramatic, but because they all echoed the same pattern: control, manipulation, and emotional leverage. Even major Hollywood names who would remain neutral began to speak with caution. Studio executives whispered about how challenging Meghan was to work with. Some joked that dealing with her team was like playing chess with a mirror. Nothing ever reflected back truthfully. Everything was spin. And then came the numbers. A recent poll showed support for the Sussexes in the US had plummeted by over 30% in the last year. In the UK, they were already seen as pariahs by many. Now the fallout had gone global. Sponsors were backing away. Potential collaborators were ghosting. Meghan's once rising empire was now a warning sign. Through it all, Harry remained mostly silent. Some say he's trying to salvage what's left of their public image behind the scenes. Others think he's just exhausted, burned out from years of media battles, family fallout, and now seeing their inner circle collapse. Tyler Perry's speech wasn't loud or angry. It didn't need to be. It was honest, quiet, and surgical. And that's what made it lethal. It didn't just expose one moment, it exposed a pattern. And in a town where reputation is everything, Meghan Markle just learned that even royalty can be exiled twice, once from the crown and now from the culture.